Hello, everyone. This is John Valines, here, Chairman of the GRC, and thank you all for joining us both in the room and online, especially since it's a Friday before Thanksgiving. So I know a lot of people are out of the office or on vacation. So I guess we're the only ones working today. So thanks for doing that. So we first have the minutes, and that should have you should have received that in your welcome email earlier in the week or last week.
Did you want to do introductions first?
What was that?
Did you want to do introductions first?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I've been gone a few months. So let's go ahead and do introductions. We'll start on this side of the room and we'll go around and then we'll go online.
Jason Conway, I'm the chair of the COC and the executive director for the Modesto Gospel Mission.
Brad Hahn, structural engineer and volunteer.
Peggy O'Donnell, Mid-Valley Connections, and a chamber board member.
I'm Sabrina Gonzalez Fuel, Modesto Chamber Membership Coordinator. Almost forgot my title, guys.
That's not good.
Yeah,
I wear a lot of hats these days.
I'm John Valines. I'm COO of the Modesto Gospel Mission. And then also, though, today I'm wearing not my mission hat, but I'm chair of GRC and on the chamber board.
And I'm Cecil Russell. I work for Brad Hahn and I'm a community volunteer.
So we'll start with David. You want to introduce yourself?
David Wright, insurance broker and Modesto City Council member, District 6.
Thanks for being here, David. Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Mike Dunbar. I'm representing Assembly Member Adam Gray. Anyone?
Great to have you, Mike. And Renee, what about you?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Renee Gutierrez, Associate Planner with the Rail Commission and Amtrak San Joaquin's out of Stockton, but working from home remotely from Merced. So glad to be on today.
Wonderful. Thanks for taking the time to be here, Renee. And Nay, I believe I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
Hi, yes, good morning. My name is Nai. I'm from HealthNet. I'm Vice President for Medi-Cal Regional Lead.
Wonderful to have you, Nye.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you, everyone. And so we have meeting minutes from the October 15th meeting. This was the presentation by MID and TID. And so I'm just looking for someone to make a motion and second it. Cecil will make the motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Peggy seconds. All in favor? Say aye, raise your hands. All right, thank you. So carried. Next, we have elected officials reports. I think this will go fairly quickly today. Aside from David Wright, do we have anyone on the call from any of the elected officials' offices? I know Adam.
Yes, Adam Gray is, I represent Adam Gray.
Yeah.
Legislature's not in session right now, but our office is talking about a lot of things ranging from UC Medical Center to water to how to keep the schools whole when the vaccination requirements come into play.
All right. Thank you. I think that was it. David, you want to talk about anything from the city or your perspective?
Really nothing to report. We're always in session. We're never out of session. And we want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and eat a lot of turkey and get back to work on Monday.
Wonderful. Dejanay, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Dejanay Shelton. I'm the Career Services Director for Modesto Junior College, and I am a Chamber of Commerce board member.
Awesome. Happy to have you, Dejanay. Thanks for joining us.
And we got free MJC tuition next semester, right?
Yes.
We do. It's super exciting.
Yeah. Cecil's going to go back and finish his degree. So.
Come on back, Cecil, or take an art class, or maybe consider, photography. There's something for everyone at MJC.
Great.
True.
Okay, well, with that being said, we don't have anyone else here, and League of Cities isn't here. So what today, on today's topic, we have two men who should not be strangers to the GRC. They both are members of the GRC and have been here before and even presented. But one of the things I thought would be interesting is these two guys sit on committees that have a lot of influence on the homelessness solutions, and they even, COC, as you'll hear, even control some purse strings. And I think people assume that the county receives the federal or the cities receive federal funds, and when money comes from HUD and so forth, that they just get to just make all the calls, and that's not entirely true. So we thought this would be good for Jason, who is chairman of the COC, and he'll explain what that means. And then Brad Hahn, who is not only a volunteer, former city council member, and he's chairman of the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance, which people refer to as SHAW by its acronym. So I think Jason's starting, so go ahead.
So we'll get the slides up. So basically, how it is on the first slide, you'll see a continuum of care. It's actually named.
We're having a hard time hearing them.
Oh, sorry about that.
Of care.
If you could speak up a little bit, they're having trouble hearing
Can
you.
you hear me, guys?
Yeah,
Okay, so basically every community has a system of care. So basically what a system of care is it's a federally mandated body of board or council that each local community, each county is obligated to have a continuum of care. What that basically is from HUD, which is a federal body, then they decide and they pass down block grants that end up in the local continuum, and it's their responsibility as that continuum then to figure out and devise a plan from that federal money into the local continuum, all surrounded about homeless and housing. Next slide. So basically I stole their kind of the purpose off of the HUD website. So this kind of gives you basically a little paragraph of exactly what the continuum of care is. And I'll just read it. It says a continuum of care program is designed to promote community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness, provide funding for efforts by nonprofit providers and state and local governments to quickly rehouse homeless individuals and families while minimizing the trauma and dislocation caused to homeless individuals, families, and communities by homelessness, promote access to and effect utilization of mainstream programs by homeless individuals and families, and optimize self-sufficiency among individuals and families experiencing homelessness. So one of the core things on this guideline from the federal all the way to the state is what's called housing first model. And basically the housing first model is the federal government's guidelines in order for funding to be distributed is you have to house the individual first before you require any type of services. So not only is that federally mandated, it gets doubled down by the state of California. So anything that trickles down, it goes from the federal to the state distributes it down to the local continuum of cares, and the local continuum of cares has to navigate all their programs and all the funding around models about housing first. Next slide. So basically, just a couple of basic overdrafts of the model is the council represents all major sectors of the community. It makes up about 22 to 24 members. And that is simply from an array of different nonprofits, lived experience, the faith sector, lived experience, government, and it's made up of just a pool of people, mainly community, coming together to work towards the main goal, as we described the purpose, is to end homelessness, is basically the objective of the continuum of care. Now, in the course of everything, as you see in the slide, the people that really are doing a lot of the work and the staff is the CSA, it's the Stanislaus County Community Service Agency. They serve as the collaborative applicant. And that is made up Their responsibility is reporting, monitoring other key functions necessary to keep the COC in compliance with HUD regulations. I have to say that it's great. We who sit on as council are volunteers. I mean, that's what our role is. The real work and the heavy lifting sometimes comes from county staff who serve as the collaborative applicant. And they do a well job keeping everything from getting with us to setting the agenda to really making sure what's called the notice of funding availability, what's known as an acronym, the NOFA, that gets filled out, which is a core responsibility of the continuum. And that is what HUD will release, letting us know what funding is coming down. I will say prior to COVID, the COC, their allotment of funding was anywhere from $1 to $3 million. What our responsibility was to take the $1 to $3 million and then to, number one, begin to figure out where that needs to be placed. We have to understand the climate of homelessness in our local community. That's why it's made up local, representing the different sectors, and then distribute that in a competitive RFP process. But what's happened because of COVID, we've seen that allocation increase probably 10 to 25%, 10 to 20% more, not 20%, but times more, meaning 2 to 3 millions turned into 25 to $30 million has hit the continuum of care in the last several months. You'll see some of that reported out in the Modesto B. And my personal viewpoint, you're left alone when you're only pushing 1 to 3 million. All of a sudden you push 25, 30 million and the spotlight gets put on you. And all of a sudden everybody wants to have something to say about that. Working alongside the community, we decided to really devise a plan and use that as what called the CB coronavirus passed by Congress in the CARES Act, was to distribute an allocation of funds to state that distributes it to local communities in order to support operations of shelter providers in the community. That was the intent of Congress when they passed that, or Congress in the CARES Act was that it would go to shelter providers. That's the problem with federal funding, is we don't get to think outside the box, unfortunately. It's not like we had $27 million to say, hey, what can we best do for the community? You're in a kind of lane of where that money gets spent. So really alongside of county and the COC, we adopted a plan to distribute that money to nonprofit agencies of service providers. So basically everybody from Patterson, which is Cambridge Academies, Turlock Gospel Mission, We Care, Salvation Army, Center for Human Services, they all received a pretty good amount of allocation from that in a reimbursement platform that's ran by county planning. They have to invoice it out. And then when that invoice comes in, that money goes back out to the nonprofits. So that was kind of the difference from year over year, is we went from being responsible for 1, 2, 3 million to being responsible to 27, $30 million, which is a good lump of sum, which impacts the community in a positive way. Next slide. So basically, as you see here, this is kind of a roadmap of what a continuum of care looks like. I did not design this. I stole this off of the HUD website, but this is kind of what it is. This is kind of the continuum of care. It's made of the board that I described, which is the 22 to 24 members. It's made of work groups that get together, and it's made of community stakeholders, and it's made of the HMIS lead. And what HMIS is coordinated entry. And what coordinated entry is they man basically the database of the homeless management information system is what HMIS stands for. And what that is Congress uses that data to allocate funds in a macro way. So all the agencies that get funding will input their data into the HMIS system. That data gets populated from a micro to a macro level, letting us know as community members what actually is going on locally. And then it also gets macroed into to Congress in a bigger scale, letting them know what's going on. And it is it's an obligation if you receive funding that you do have to input into the HMIS system. And not everybody that has funding, even if you don't have funding, there's a lot of other agencies that do put into the HMIS system because it does help the community. So for example, putting on my mission cap, we do not receive any federal funds. We do not receive any state fundings in the 75 years that we've been in existence. Neither did we tap into any of the 27 million when other agencies did. But we still, as an agency, put our information into the HMIS database because what that does is we, as an agency, the Modesto Gospel Mission I'll use, we have a good section of providing services in this community. And we wouldn't want, or myself wouldn't want what we do not to be added to the numbers because those numbers is what brings revenue and money and grants into the community. So basically the collaborative applicant we know as an agency, which is the CSA, which is now the collaborative applicant. And all of this basically around here is community input. So we're not under the Brown Act. We do have bylaws. These bylaws are drafted locally. We do have a governance, but one of the things that the government, the federal government, is participation from the community. It's pretty large, like anything else. So we make sure that we allow the community a voice in all that we kind of do and all that we say. But all of this, as you can see, goes down to grant recipients. That's the whole thing. It's dividing the funds that come in and figuring out in a very competitive process. We have a ranking panel that will get formed. They rank individuals, sometimes, like I said, from the two different, I would say two different, hills, so to speak, when you have 1 to 3 million and you have all these agencies that are coming in, there's a lot of interest and not enough money. So that competitive scoring comes in where you have, say, 5 or 6 nonprofits that will come for $1 million, and you can only disperse to several of them. So that gets done in a RFP process, a right for funding proposal, and then that gets scored. And upon the score, then the allocation of funds gets to the grant recipient. Then you can have the other side of the spectrum where you have $27–30 million and everybody gets funded. But they still have to go through that process and that scoring process of that. Next slide.
Could I
Yeah,
ask you a question? Back to the slide before.
Before slide.
You said there's a number of groups in that. Who are some of those?
So groups as
That
on the board. Yeah, so here's an example. City manager for Riverbank is one. Let me see here. City representative from Turlock would be one. A representative from Modesto would be one. It's only a representative from that area. Is another one.
But are providers part of this group?
Yes. So for myself, for my role, is in the faith representative. But I've also sat on the lived experience.
But recipients of the $20–30 million are part of the group too.
Yes, they can be.
And so when do they vote to disperse the monies or is it just an application? And then if so, then who approves the application?
Yeah, so basically, once that process goes in, the conflict of interest doesn't really happen until the ranking of the applicant. So if you go back and we went through some conflict of interest training, so you can make a vote for the disbursement of the funds for this use, it begins a conflict of interest. If your organization is going for that fund, then you cannot sit on the ranking panel that makes that determination of who ranks the highest to get that funding.
So you said you guys can't be the recipient of the money, but can an organization like Salvation Army?
They are a recipient.
They are.
Yes,
And they are a voting member too?
they are voting into Major Herald is on as a
So
member.
who similar to them, so take yourself out
Yeah.
of that, your organization out of
Yeah.
that. Salvation Army is fairly substantial.
Yeah.
Are there other organizations like Salvation Army that are part of it?
A Center for Human Services would be another one. We Care, which is as big, but they are a part of it. Yeah, so those.
There was an organization years ago, we had a presentation by a group out of Patterson.
Yeah.
Had a unique approach to taking care of the homeless. And
Yes.
that. And it was, wasn't government run, it was
Yeah.
a group of ladies, if I remember back then. Are they part of this?
So is that Cambridge Academy, sort of the Fresh Start?
Yeah, no, it's Jenny.
Yeah, Ginny Boyer.
Yeah,
Yeah, so she's not on the
so
COC.
she could be a recipient of some of this.
Yeah, oh, yes. Anybody, you don't have to be on this part right here. You do not have to be in order to be a recipient. What happens is HUD has kind of determined who they would like to see on this. So on the board, so they usually have it's broken up in different.
So is it just the people who provide for the homeless, or is it also organizations that do drug rehab?
Well, yeah, homeless is a primary objective, veteran homeless. But in the course of, I would say addiction recovery, you will have a splash because homelessness, but it mainly has to do, you have to be doing something within the homeless kind of hunt, because that's what that like exit is homelessness. So it has to be something that kind of derives from that, as long as if it's, for example, Cecil, if it's providing A, B, and C for the homeless. So if it's recovery programs for the home, then yes. But if it's just simply providing drug and alcohol counseling for, somebody that has a house, then probably most likely not.
Stanco's another, they're on the
Yeah,
board.
Steve,
so
yeah.
Steve Madison's on the
Mhm.
board, so. Because they do housing.
Yeah.
Okay.
They do housing, for example, they manage Kansas, the Kansas project, and they manage several different outlets. Yeah, so they would qualify to be able to sit at the seat of the table, so to speak.
They qualify for funding also,
They can, yes,
because they already have.
they can.
They have a large bucket of. money
Yeah.
that they
And
qualify.
most of the time, Cecil, when something like that comes down, then you just, you call out your conflict and you just excuse yourself from the vote. I mean, that's the way I do it. Like if anything was coming down, it's better to call out, say, hey, I have a conflict of interest, I'm not gonna vote on it, and then you recuse yourself from it.
Even if it might be a potential.
Even, yeah, because even perceived conflict.
Yeah.
That's, you gotta be careful with perceived conflicts. So even that, the best course is just to say, I have a conflict, here's the conflict, and I'm not gonna vote. And even if you can technically vote, but it's best not to do it. It's just to.
Well, particularly because you said, I heard you say earlier that when the funds were only $2 to $3 million, it wasn't as visible as that.
Yes.
Now it's 20, 30 million.
Yep.
You always have more critics.
Oh, yeah.
Or that.
Yeah.
So I would think that even the perceived conflict of interest
Yeah.
would be well
Sometimes,
stated.
yes. Sometimes the perceived is worse than actual
Yeah.
conflict. It's the way it looks like. So absolutely. I think one more slide.
And just to clarify real quick, because you kind of mentioned it, but the board members, it sounds like, do they have categories like by industry? Is that how it?
Yeah, there's different categories of community providers and, funders, and there's different categories that we have. I didn't bring that because that, I didn't want to get too much into the weeds of everything. The operating of the COC, basically the continuum of care, the responsibilities, the governance responsibilities, again, that is the bylaws that we have. We are underneath the bylaws of system operations responsibilities and designating and operating an HMIS. That's huge, which is the database that puts all the information into the software, into the database that gives and populates basically where we are as a community. You'll hear a lot too in the media, the point in time count, which is one of these, each year we're mandated to do a point in time count. Every January, the community has to get volunteers to go sweep the county basically and count the homeless. And that is a point in time count. Sometimes we put too much emphasis on that point in time count, and we should be putting more emphasis on the HMIS and what the actual numbers are too. And planning for the COC geographic area, some of our core responsibilities, having a plan and then implementing that plan. And we were mandated to have a 5-year plan, to share that plan and all that stuff. That's basically what I have. Any questions or anything? Before I hand it over to Mr. Brad. Okay.
So it's difficult because HUD sets this thing up and it's an inherently a conflict of interest every way you turn. But that's the way they set it up, and that's the way the money comes through. And before COVID, the COC was bumping along, you know, and there was just a few people on it, and all of a sudden it became, my gosh, all this money's coming down. But there's no correlation between what happened in the code, that it really set us up for success in the future. That about 3 years ago, we got together and said, you know, the COC and this $3.8 million is doing something here, but through focus on prevention, this whole thing of trying to get everybody in the room, trying to start talking to each other, it evolved into what's called the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance, which is, and when Jody Hayes came up with it, I thought it was crazy, because it's basically electeds from each city. And I'm thinking, man, last thing I want to do is deal with a bunch of electeds, you know, sorry, David, but I was there. And, yeah, but David's different than most I'm talking about, because he's just a regular guy. But anyway, but Jody said they're the only people that we can hold accountable in our community. Like, I'm a volunteer, and you really can't hold me accountable. I mean, you can hold me accountable because of you said this, you know, your character says you should do that, but these guys, we don't like them, we can vote them out. And they're the only ones that have the ability to do something about policy. So if there is something that happens, like what's happening now, we were able to, and we work hand in hand with the CSOC, and it's been a really interesting relationship, because you've got a bunch of people who are in the trenches, and then you've got a bunch of people who sit on boards and who are electeds and people like that. And I think the two together is what really needs to happen. We need to get our data and information on general what should be done in homelessness from the people from the CSOC. But this is me talking, I'm not representing anybody, but I think that the Shaw should help to work how that happens. How is Riverbank gonna get a shelter from, like Jenny Boyers you talked about? And that's what happened. We worked with Riverbank to get the funding to build that way and to fund the operation of that.
And the volunteers to operate?
Yeah, well, the volunteers, it's operated by paid people, and then there's volunteers that, I mean, there's typically a church that kind of latches onto that and really provides the human support behind that. But it's a really interesting thing, but something that, and there's lots of stories about this and that, but I would say if you took a system that was bumping along with no money and not much responsibility, $3 million, and all of a sudden you started to put a fire hose to that, who'd never seen anything but $3 million, and basically it was the providers in the room doling out the funds to the providers in the room, which is just the way it's set up. Well, now we've got money coming in, like Home Key, there's like $165 million of Home Key money that's designated for the valley. 165 million.
Let me ask you a question that I didn't have to say. This money is because of COVID or COVID.
No, not,
But it's federal money.
it's all federal or state.
How
Yes.
did, well, maybe you should back up and say, how did that get?
Well, Congress,
How did that come about?
how did it
And then-
come about?
and then- But let me get to my ultimate question. Answer that one first, but the ultimate question is, what is the oversight from the federal government and how this money is spent?
Oh, it's like unbelievable. Because the basic problem we have, and this is me talking, the basic problem is government gives us money based on what they think the solution to homelessness is. And I've had people, Darrell Steinberg and the mayor of Oakland, tell us that giving people opportunity and provide housing is a solution to homelessness. Now let's take a walk around downtown at 5 o'clock when I run in the morning. I tell you, housing and opportunity is not going to help a lot of people. And so in this county, what we're trying to take the money with that premise, and that's the way they are. Housing first is as a model, and I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that. It's just, again, if I get you in a house, if you're severely mentally ill and on drugs and been on the streets for 30 years, if I get you a house, your life is going to change. And I don't think that's true. I mean, try that with your kids, right? It doesn't work that way. And so we have to, they give it to us with those parameters around it. We have to figure out how to manipulate them into stuff that we think is going to work for us. And we're making good inroads into that. And it's going to take us a couple of years to really turn this thing around, because you started out with a system that was totally undeveloped. And then you threw a bunch of money at it. And now what you've done, the money from COVID has reinforced the silo mentality, because I've got $22 million. Open your mouth. Can you take some? Can you take some? And it just, we're not talking to each other. So in the process of all this, we continued on with developing a countywide homeless action plan. And it's just got approved at the Shaw, and it'll be going, and the Shaw approved it, and then CSOC approved it, and then it's going to the board.
So
This
could you
month.
clarify what those two acronyms mean?
The CSOC is the one he described, the Shaw is a Stanislaus Homeless Alliance, which
Okay.
I'm on with the electeds.
What's the other?
Yeah.
Before we get too far, I think Dejanay had a question.
Uh-oh.
I do, thank you. I just have a question in terms of what you just stated regarding providing homeless people with housing. In what stage do you start working to get them into housing? Well, I do appreciate that we certainly need to start working on mental health, jobs and all of that. It's difficult to do that if you're living under a bridge. So at what stage do you work to ensure that they have secure housing while you're also making sure that they receive benefits and services?
The very first thing that's done for someone who goes into the shelter or they meet on the streets is develop a housing plan. So I'm not diminishing the fact that housing isn't important, but it's for some, that's all it is. Some people, you just need to give them a hand up and give them the help to get into housing. And I'm going to tell you about something that we're working on right now that fits that category. But if you've been chronically homeless for a long time, it's going to take it's a process that's going to have to happen. And yes, housing is the number one thing that started, because what do you got to do to get in housing? Well, you need to get your Social Security card. You need to get off of drugs. You need to do those things that are going to help you along the way. And so the housing plan is like the number one thing that starts out. And with that, the ultimate goal is housing. So there's services that you need, and EBD cards and all of those things that come with that. So we got this homeless action plan, and it's a huge document. And we did it with a consultant And they listened to us, they did it the way we asked them. We asked them, we want it by community. So when we know what Turlock's needs are, and we know what Patterson's needs are. And that being approved is one of those documents, if you read it, I don't think you'd probably learn a whole lot, you know. But it is the start. And what happens in the next year is going to prove to us whether this homeless system can actually be developed, because we do not have one. We have kind of it's like a pickup basketball game right now. You know, people, they come and it's not organized. And that's what this is going to do. The goal of that is to go to each community and say to Riverbank, what do you need? Well, I need some caseworkers. I need 4 caseworkers, and I need this. I need somebody to do the home HMIS system, which that is actual data on you and you if you're homeless. It's data on people. And so we know where you are. We know where you've been. We know what services you're getting. And so we can help you along as you cross into the services that I might be providing for you. So we're going to do that. We're actually going to put meat on the bones, is what I say, is we're going to find out. It's like Riverbank. I need 25 units of transitional housing. Okay, where's the site? Do you have a piece of property? And then we'll build that and draw the plans for it, get it going. So when the money comes, it'll go to that type of activity.
So back to something you said earlier. That Oakland, Sacramento thinks that, you know, get them into the house and then everything's fine, okay? I've always come from another side that says they gotta have a job. They have to have a way, once they get off the street, once they get into housing or something, for long-term sustainability. Unless you just keep throwing money at them, welfare kind of, you know, money, you gotta get them a job. In order to get them a job, you gotta get them trained in that.
Yeah.
So the continuum is kind of backwards in my mind. If you don't educate them, if you don't train them for some kind of livelihood, some means of getting their own income coming, you can get them in all the housing that you want, but you really haven't solved anything,
right? Because
if they don't have a stream of income coming, and it can't just be welfare, it can't just be from the state constantly, and that's usually the way the state looks at things, is, you know, give them money.
Yeah.
And
well, that's why the programs that I'm personally involved with are Cambridge Academy. I'm helping, like I help with their application to get the funding with that and drew the plans for the buildings and stuff like that, get that going, because that is housing first. They're immediately put in housing. They're in a program.
Real fast, Cecil, just to answer your question. So we'll take, for example, Kansas House and all those units. What happens through the housing authority is there's housing vouchers that get released. So basically what happens is say each of those units at Kansas, there's a voucher that gets paid, their rent gets paid for.
right,
So basically in that, what you're like, even under that model, it's still, the person is still destructive in their path to sustain that housing. Even if you were to pay for that housing, that voucher pays for that, that person's behavior still finds to be destructive. And that still ends up with them leaving that place because of behavioral issues and back out on the streets. Even if that was the job or the steady income, the behavior is what has to be addressed at some level, our human behavior, and that's the problem.
And that's where we're focusing is on that.
well, I'm on the workforce development board, I've been for a long time, but and we dole out $12 million a year for training.
Yeah.
Okay, and none of that money, well, I shouldn't say none. You know, some of that money would be like to give to Dave White for his vote.
Yeah.
To, you know, perpetuate maybe $1 million a year. Now, but those people are training to get a job, maybe their first job, or to upgrade the job that they have. That's usually what this program is. But people who we're out here in the homeless city, or even veterans and that. There's gotta be a program to help train them to get a job.
Yes.
And
that's
so we don't deal with what you're dealing with at all, but in my mind, it needs to be connected with something.
Well, it is. And that's what's happening is that Jason has programs, the Salvation Army has programs. And those that are willing to make the life changes required to become able to go to work and hold a job down. We're working with those folks and the ones that I'm sure Jason's got stories, but the ones I've seen in Patterson that went from, I mean, there were a couple guys that were, I went at the beginning of a class and I thought, there's no way these guys are gonna make it. I mean, they're chronically homeless on drugs. A couple had ankle bracelets on from the county sheriff. They made it through and they have a job in housing. And that's the goal, is to help those. Now that's one segment of the homeless population who's willing to make some life changes. There's a lot that are not willing to do that. And so we have to work on those. There's a lot of mental health and substance abuse. It's the elephant in the room, when it comes to homelessness.
But you said we are connected, and yet as a board member, I have to be vice chair of this, okay? And maybe I'm not paying as much attention as I should over the last number of years, but I don't see a connection between what my organization, meaning the Workforce Development Board, does and this. And somewhere there should be, but it seems like there's maybe a piece missing in between that really connects them.
And that we have a pickup basketball game system right now. And through this homeless action plan, we're hoping to put that, to get everybody in the room that's required for how do we get people into workforce development? We've got this great opportunity here. And been talking to the sheriff and it's not a done deal because board supervisors have to approve it, but it looks like we're going to be able to use the OES incident command system like we did with COVID, like we did with other floods and things like that. And that isn't really the sheriff telling us what to do. It's basically the system that's set up to make everybody get in the room. One of the issues that's going on right now is caseworkers. There's not enough caseworkers to go out and help and get people going towards your thing. Ruben from the behavioral health has 35 openings. And then there's other openings about. And I asked them, what's the problem? They don't pay enough. They come work here, then they go somewhere else. There isn't a training. And so I said, we have to build this system to train people. It's just not going to happen. So we have to build the system. And then we have to go to the board of supervisors and say, you need to up the pay for these people because they need to make more money or we won't have it.
There's a stat that gets thrown around that says that you need a minimum of $24 an hour to be able to sustain yourself in this county for housing.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And a lot of
you got to qualify. First, you got to find a job that pays $24, but you also have to be trained to accept that job.
Yeah. And so that's what he was already Ruben was already working on that. It's pretty exciting because there are programs out there and he's working to bring those to the county so we can start doing those things. But actually in a year, that's my goal. In a year to be able to make it all around to all of the cities in the county and the municipal councils, anywhere there's homeless issues, and to build a plan and then start implementing that plan. And I think what's going to happen is, well, for instance, you talk about the funding. I helped two organizations with two different funding, and I'm a rookie. I have no idea how that stuff works. It's unbelievable, the bureaucracy within that system, built into it from the feds and the state added on top, and then you got employees in here doing it. I will say that the group that does homelessness within the city of Modesto is going to be they're going to show us how to do this. And they already have. All this money is paid in arrears. So you go build something and you turn your bills in. Go build something. Well, think of a nonprofit like Cambridge Academies. They don't have $5 million in the bank. So what you do is that these systems create almost a cottage industry for sophisticated larger nonprofits. And so we've got to come up with a system where we can help those smaller nonprofits get into the game so that, because they're the ones doing the good work. And I'm not saying the big ones don't either, but it's just, but we've got to get in the room and start working on these different issues. How do we make the funding work better? I mean, do we, and one of my ideas on the funding is to get to every nonprofit that's in homelessness and will, if you're a fledgling small nonprofit, we'll help you get like the boilerplate application put in there. And so when funding comes, hey, this fits this is right down your lane, then we'll say, okay, you've already done the hard part. Now all you've got to do is apply and compete for that other part, you know. And so and that'll help spread the money out. And the other thing is, honestly, I personally want our goal in all of this money and all this is that I asked, and I was on a review panel, and I said, you're gonna get mad at me, but I'm gonna ask you, how many people are no longer gonna be homeless because this money? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're at. And that's not fair in one sense, because maybe you do workforce development, but you don't have anything to do with helping the person's, you know, getting the soft skills. So you gotta join up with Jason,
Right.
and you gotta work together to make this happen for these folks. And then, you know, they know that they've got a pathway out of this thing. So that's pretty lofty thinking, but I think we can do it.
Well, but your question, where you stated to say, how many people are going to be out homeless? The end result of all of this has to be outcomes,
Yeah.
not bureaucracy, because God knows the country, the state, the county, the city, the great at bureaucracy, but and generally throwing money at everything, as opposed to, okay, what are the prescribed outcomes and how do we measure these outcomes? Would you would get more people willing to participate and to help.
Yep.
If you could, at the end of the day, you could say, you know, we started with 100 homeless people and we did this, and this, and this, and we're down to 60 homeless people.
The other part of this is to be able to go to funders like the state and feds and say, we'd like you to give the money to us for our plan, not your plan, but our plan, so that we can use it in a way that's going to be good for our community. And then I think we can go out to the private sector.
Well, if you have good
We have
outcomes,
outcomes. I
then
think
you can turn the tables on that to say, with these outcomes, this is why we deserve the money, because we have these kind of outcomes.
that place in Patterson, 60%, 70% success rate.
And just to add to that,
Unbelievable.
like what Brad is saying, and even myself, it's coming alongside these smaller nonprofits and helping them build the capacity to compete with the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Evidence-based programming is what works on a federal level. They want to see evidence-based programs.
Right.
Many times.
Which is about outcomes.
Yeah,
Right?
many times with the smaller agencies, they don't have the infrastructure to be able to compete, and we have to do a better job as a continuum in the Shaws to help support them. Not only accounting wise, because that's a whole nother issue. You're talking small nonprofits getting federal dollars through the door, their accounting team are not equipped to handle that type of documentation, even though accounting and planning is.
But
helping them.
they may have better outcomes than the bigger
Exactly.
organizations.
Well, see, and it's our job.
Because they
Yes.
spend the money directly.
Yeah, so.
effective, as opposed to building bureaucracy within their own agency.
Exactly, because every dollar, they get, that's what happens, and it's sometimes a smaller scale is it easier to look at because it has better outcomes.
So I'm going to give you an example of that's going to be contrary sort of what I've been saying about how the feds, you know, give us this money a certain way. Home Key is what was the other one? It was a COVID thing where they took all the people over 65 who are at risk for COVID and put them in a hotel. Very expensive, but they did. It was very successful. And about half of those people got housed, which is pretty amazing. But they're coming out with home key now, and it's a lot of money. That's 165 million just for the ballot. And it's basically taking older, underperforming commercial property and turning it into housing. And there's a couple examples. We're working on one right now that is on 9th Street. And it's formerly been the behavioral health, as you had it, renting it for drop-in center for behavioral health. And I got approached, I'm a part owner, I own 1/6 of it. And there's the appearance of bad stuff, but anyway, we're moving forward with it, and they're making us do all the work ahead of time. Get the appraisal, get the phase 1, get all the contracts, get the plans, get the permits before they give us the money, which is pretty brilliant to me. I mean, isn't that the way you typically do it? But then they'll give us the money within like 2 weeks. Say, yes, this is a project, it will go. We're on a weekly call with them to help make it through all this stuff. And they're trying their darndest to make it happen. Now it's prevailing wage. It's got all the stuff that comes with it, but they're giving them $175,000 per door. So this particular project that we're working on has 14 units. There's 9 studios, they're little, and there's 5 single bedroom, they're little, but they have kitchenette like you'd see in a motel type thing. They've got an 80 bathroom and a washer and dryer and all that, and they're all ADA accessible because that's something that we need to do with that population. But it's going to be for youth who are timing out of the foster care system. Just this is so exciting to me because I can't imagine that system and getting a new apartment downtown, and their situation is they just need help on the ground. And they're mostly people who are going to be going to Modesto Junior College. They're going to be.
That was my question. In the scenario that you're describing, who vets the people who get?
It's Center for Human Services project. They just set up a youth shelter, and they're taking folks and navigating them through to get them on their feet, not back on their feet.
It's a navigation center.
Yeah, it's a navigation center and all that stuff. And they're the people that are going to be in these rooms. And it doesn't have a program associated with it. It's just they're there. They're going to be giving them money for rent if they can't afford it, and so to get them going. So, and it's permanent housing. They live there forever. But the goal is if they move into market rate housing, and hopefully we can save up some of their money and say, here's $2,000 for your person to get you off into that next thing. So we're working on pieces and parts of this, and if we can get that whole system looking like that, and the big issue, it's really going to be hard, is the mental health and drug thing. But I think we have, Jason and I personally, and I think collectively, we've realized that unless you give people a chance to build back into their lives to what all of us have, and have relationships and a group of people around you that support you, then people, and of course it has to be the willingness to change. But the willingness to change starts when I see my friend here who was sleeping next to me on the street. Now all of a sudden they're in this program and they're getting better, and maybe I can do that. And so it's pretty exciting. And I think within a year we should have that system set up. And that's going to take another year because then it's the fundraising time. Right? Mike is on the line. I've been talking to Megan at Adam Gray's office because the thing that the government doesn't fund is the programming. And that program is very expensive. I would like to see 10 of those Cambridge things around the county, and that's $5 million a year.
So and maybe I, again, wasn't paying attention when you started. When you said you went from 3 million to 20 million, is that 20 million is that an ongoing,
No, it's
it's just
not.
a
Yeah.
one-time?
Yeah, that was a couple times. We've had 2 different disbursements with Congress in the CARES Act, and then the second half of that.
But the money that's
So
gonna
one-
come,
But you still have the 3.5.
Yeah, and then the state is allocating a good portion under his budget for homelessness to Governor Newsom is advocating. He's bringing that to.
but it's away from emergency shelter and it's towards housing, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, they're not gonna wanna fund emergency shelters. The first disbursement did because they were trying to support those that are doing the work operationally, which was like the Salvation Armies and the Modesto Gospel Missions. They were trying to support them. There was certain criteria you have to face and meet, but
The project, the city or county that they bought the old motel
yeah.
on Bridgemore.
Yeah.
And
Sis.
converting that, is that part of this?
That's a housing authority, so that is micro housing that they're gonna be doing for those that are working. They have a job but they just can't afford it, so that whole district right there with Walmart, In-N-Out, it's gonna be a micro little village in there. Basically tailored around those that are working, just can't afford housing.
And that was the creativity of our nonprofits, like the Housing Authority. They bought that building and the whole building based on them needing an office, and it's funded based on that. But they got all this other stuff out there that's really where their heart is to do that. There's room to build more units. So it's we don't use the word affordable housing because that has all kinds of connotations. We say workforce housing, which is the delta between, and some of the people in the shelter say right now they're gonna get their lives together and get a job. They're never gonna make more than minimum wage. I mean, that's just a fact. So if they're willing to work, I think we should support them under here, but not just, give people money.
If you don't, you've got to support them anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
we
people are happier when they're working. They're, they feel like they're doing something good. But anyway, it's a very complicated thing, and but we're on a pathway to getting this thing done. And I honestly think, and I remember you saying this one time, we might be able to turn the tables on this thing. And functional zero homeless can be attained. You're always gonna have homeless, but people make choices but functional homeless is within 90 days of you becoming homeless, you have a pathway out with a housing plan and all that stuff. If you're willing. If you're not willing, there's nothing we can do about that. But there's several cities that have come to that, and I think we can get there. Because we have people on the streets now that they've been homeless for 30 years.
Yeah.
This guy I talked to, he said, I was a crack addict for 30 years. And he's sitting there talking to me, kind of how bad. Somebody, how your brain must have been rejuvenated somehow. Because, but anyway, people can change. I've been blown away at people that I thought had no chance in change. But it's that spark inside of them that says that I want to make a difference in my life, and that put the support around them that creates that ability for them to.
So you didn't touch on the Camp to Home program the city of Modesto is doing, but that's walking people through some of these steps and helping them get into housing as well.
Right. And that's
It's all interconnected.
It's all interconnected, but it's different people at different spots, and that's very successful.
Right.
And I got
Pretty
accused of-
comprehensive.
Yeah, I got accused of cherry picking because I was talking about the stuff that's happening in Patterson. That's, well, yeah, I guess we are, but that's a segment of homelessness. If we can get that moving, then we can move on to the big one that is going to be the hardest is the and the drugs. And it's not that we're neglecting it, it's that we've got, the only reason this is happening for me is because somebody else did it. All I'm doing is just waving a banner and trying to make it help them do better. So anyway, that's kind of it. And it's very I'm very optimistic that we can make some big changes, and it just takes time. And we were making great headway with the homeless on the streets before COVID, and that kind of blew that out the back. And then now we're starting to get back, and there's some glitches in the system. It takes a long time to get assessed when you go to the shelter, and there's lots of attention on that right now. I'm trying to get that fixed so that we can, you know, because we're out here saying, oh, you know, go to the shelter, and then they go to, well, we can see you in 3 weeks. If you're ready to do it, you're ready to do it right now. I'm not ready to do it 3 weeks. So there's lots of things that have to be fixed. So
I will add real fast, there are so many different awesome downtown streets too.
Yes.
You know, which is, at first I was kind of like, well, how is that gonna really work? But obviously they're downtown, they're in different areas and they're working. You have the city, you have the Modesto Police Department with what used to be the HARP team. And now it's called Chat, where they have 4 different individuals who have lived experience, you know, interacting with the parks and the homeless people. You have Camp to Home.
not the police.
Yeah, not the police, but actually, you have Camp to Home with the city of Modesto that had an allocation of funds. They used it for that purpose. You have the shop, you have so much systems trying to work together. And then what we're trying to do, myself and Brad, is just trying to all work together, which is the hardest thing you can try to get people to get around the table together to make it work. What we're fighting is human nature. What we're fighting is addiction. What we're fighting is mental health. That will be a struggle. Like you can't solve the complexity of what people want to do and that are bound to brokenness and addiction. But I do believe that we can make a dent in this thing. We don't believe that we should be around here doing anything about it, but I think we can make a dent.
So then a little example of that is I was eating lunch at Harvest Moon, and one of the waitresses that I know a little bit said, hey, we're going to have a we're going to feed the homeless on December 18th. And she kind of described it. And I said, well, are you interested? Maybe should get together with a larger group of people. And because a lot of times we do stuff that hurts more than it helps. You know, like feeding homeless is not always the best solution. So Jason and Harold from the Salvation Army, a guy from Veterans and Downtown Streets team, and now we're going to have this Harvest Moon. They have backpacks, and you know, and this is a gal that owns it who lived in her car for 3 or 4 years. I guess that would be considered homeless, don't you? And back east, she said, I just want to do something. So, but instead of her doing that and creating another silo to have to chip into, we were able to make it happen all at once. So those are just little things that show that we have a chance to make this work. So anyway.
Wonderful.
Thank
Our
you.
community is known for having so many caring, compassionate people, and so organizations, and so efforts, and it takes the moment where you can align them together so
Yeah.
that they're not separate, because you can kind of build on your resources and your potential by coming together.
And we're
It's a
not
stronger force.
And we're not replicating services. That's
Right.
another big thing. We don't need to replicate services. We just need to know what each other is doing so that we can provide the best service, leverage what we're good at. And
Each.
each, because we're all good at something. I mean, you know.
And it's our neighbor who happens to be homeless. Who we say, oh, you need behavioral health. You got to go out there on Blue Gum. But you got to go over there. You need a voucher. Well, you need to go get your social security card. It's over there. You got to do this. And then I get put in jail and I'm out there. And, you know, we're trying to get a system that makes it so that people can navigate it too,
Yeah.
and get somebody, a buddy to hook up with them to help them through this whole process. And then we're going to see, because everything is about relationships. Everything in our whole lives is about relationships, and dealing with this homeless issue is about relationships. You have to build a relationship with somebody who's lost every relationship that they've ever had, and their total focus is getting a fix or getting a lunch or getting whatever for that day. That's all they can think about. But if you can build a relationship with them, and heard him preach this all the time, you know, it's about building that relationship, breaking down the barriers so that people can make changes if they want to.
One last thing is, is really helping organizations identify the urgency when somebody walks through their door to bring that person in right then. I mean, I saw my experience is 15 years in the trenches of things. And a lot of agencies, they have bureaucracy when you walk through, like, I'll come back next Wednesday. This person is trying to get their life together. You have that point in time. You have to capture that point in time and get them into that program. You cannot let that person say, come back next Wednesday. And it's getting the agencies that do this work to understand, like, the urgency is so important to get that person through that door. And we preach at our place, like somebody walks in that lobby, man, I want a chaplain like to walk over in that point in time and take that person in as fast as we can, because they might not come back. And that's really important.
So, this has been very enlightening for me, okay? My question would be, I mean, it's really sad that we don't have a full house. You know, we don't have 30, 40, 50 people listening to this from the community, from business leaders and that. So we didn't get that. So my question is, how do you communicate what you communicated today? Even the charts and stuff that you had. How do you get that out to more people that can assist in this? How do you do that?
Well, we don't have a mechanism for that. We are terrible.
No, I know it's.
And that
rhetorical
through this incident command thing, that's gonna be one of the subjects, is how do we communicate?
I'm assuming that Jody and his whole crew, they're all on board, and, you know, the city of Modesto, the mayor and city council all on board, and they understand everything. I see Dave, you know, David's here, let him comment in a minute, but there's lots of other groups, you know, whether it be the Rotaries or the, you know, whatever, that, you know, have 50 to 100, you know, people at various meetings and that. It just seems to me that some of the good stuff that goes on in our community are the best kept secrets.
Yeah, and I think that what got me going in this whole homeless thing is having a house on the off ramp, by homeless off ramp at Great State Park, and people stealing stuff and was remodeling the house and all that. But you just don't. People are without hope. My neighbors are without hope. They don't know what to do. Somebody's sleeping in the alley, or somebody's doing this, or there's a homeless person that's begging for money. They don't know what to do. And once we get people engaged in the system and figure out what's happening, how they can help, and that stuff is happening. There's some good stuff happening. That builds hope in the people, in my neighbors. And I did this several years ago in my neighborhood. There was a small group there, and I got done. And I said, "You didn't ask any questions." And 6 months before, they were shooting me almost with a shotgun because they were so frustrated. And I asked, "How come you didn't ask me any questions?" They said, "Well, we like what you said." And so we're happy. We'll keep working, keep doing it. And that's something that information can bring that hope.
So we'll help you get a little started on that, in that we are recording this and we will have it on our website. We will be tagging the organizations you want to have.
That's helpful. But Brad, I've known you for a long time, and back when you were a councilman, and then you decided, when we were sitting in here, you talked to me, would we support you running for mayor? And then, of course, we did, and unfortunately, you didn't make it. But you said something very, very important. Once you lost, you said in the same office, and you said, "Cecil, I can do more not being in government than I could if I had stayed in government." Do you remember telling me that? And ever since then,
I still hate blues.
ever since then, you've been an advocate for everything. You walk the talk, okay? And you talk the talk really, really well, but you also walk that talk. And we need more people, Brad, like you. I mean, these guys have devoted their life's work, these days to taking care of not just the homeless, but the whole process. And it makes me sit here and think, again, how do we, and thank the chamber very much for saying this is a, podcast or whatever we call them today and that. And you'd love to know how many hits you get, how many people, would listen to it. But I think you need a road show.
Yeah, we might have some cosmetic surgery first. but-
You both went,
Yeah, but no, you're right. It's part of we don't tell the story very well. We have to do better.
so we hosted a few of the representatives from the city when they wanted to share outwardly with business on the Camp to Home program. And we've tried to help promote that as well. So if you guys pull that stuff together, you're welcome. We can create more of a webinar opportunity where you can. present that.
And Progress Magazine too is a pretty good forum for updates and even just explaining it, having that coming out of
Have a
this,
whole piece, yeah.
a piece on this.
It's disappointing to me that we don't have more people. And I know everybody's still, COVID and all this and that.
Well, they saw who was speaking.
But you've got a board, and suggesting that I'm trying to tell you how to do your job or anything, but the board needs to hear this. Your complete board.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how you do that, but
Well, when they're ready with something as a complete package, we've been having a
Yeah.
guest presenter about every 2 to 3 board meetings. And so this can be on the lineup.
I'm doubtful that most people know that the funds that are available or the interaction between the agencies and that. I mean, this has been a great learning experience for me, but I can't do you any good. Okay. All I can do is sit here and say, hey, keep up the good work. But that 25 cents will get you a cup of coffee at McDonald's,
Probably not.
It's $1 now, right?
It's probably more than that now. Well, and to that point, I mean, I know that when the chamber sends out GRC emails, the list is, it lists like 20 people and then it says plus 99 more. So I mean, even, this and all of our GRC meetings, this agenda is, is going out, the minutes will be going out to over 100 leaders and government officials and representatives. But yeah, it's hard, we've always struggled
Well,
with
the
that at the
attention-
chamber.
The attention span for most people is pretty short. And we have been here an hour, okay? Maybe a little bit longer or that. And it's hard to get groups together. And even when I say, hey, you gotta talk to the board, well, board meeting's on an hour or so, right? And so you take up the whole board meeting with something like this. But it's, if you ever really want real outcomes and you want more people in the community, that'll be something. I don't know. I don't have the answers. It's just.
So John, if they want to brainstorm opportunities, we can do that after the meeting.
Yeah, definitely. And when I was, I've heard before, both when I was here at the chamber and otherwise, like, how come the police just don't round up the homeless and go take them and drop them off in Salvation Army or the Mission? And, it's, a lot of people don't really want to deal with it. I think Brad hit on it a little bit. It makes them uncomfortable. They don't know what to do. They feel bad for the people, but, also mental health and addiction, and they don't know how to even interact with homeless. And so, yeah.
Obviously, this is government relations, but in my mind, this subject that you guys covered today is economic development. And maybe more so. Because the government relations portion of this, you guys have got it kind of wired. The economic development portion of this is if we can get these folks taken care of, get them into housing and get them some jobs and that, it has a huge impact on the economy of the community and all the businesses. Because the more folks that you get off the street, it's easier for them to do their business and that. I mean, to connect the dots back to economic development should be fairly, I don't want to say easy because things are never that easy, but you guys understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the main complaints of downtown businesses is
Right,
homeless,
right.
so.
Well, not only that, you look at the hospitals, you look at how that changes, and believe it or not, there's a big impact on homelessness in our the ER rooms,
Right.
you know, institutions, you know, jails, you know, you look at all that cost that it costs a taxpayer and how, because of solving this problem.
And that's how I connect it back to
Yeah.
economic development. Because if you take that cost from the
Oh,
taxpayers
man,
out of this
that's a huge
equation,
amount of
and
money.
they can then invest that money
Yeah.
in other productive things, we all win.
Yeah, it's a huge amount.
Ironically, I'm gonna say, I remember sitting in this, years ago when we first had a presentation on focus on prevention.
Yeah.
Back then, they talked about, we're gonna hit 5 areas, youth and incarceration was gonna be second. I don't remember the rest. And I remember somebody, I don't remember who it was at the time, but they said wasn't Jody, it was prior to Jody, but somebody said, we're tackling homelessness first because we think that's low hanging fruit. Like that'll be one of the easiest things to deal with. But I think anybody who actually works in the area knows it's very convoluted. Every person that's homeless is homeless for a reason. And a lot of times those are varying reasons and they got varying solutions. So
I think I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think homelessness is so fundamental and in our face that's what, I mean, it's a very, very, very complicated thing, but how do you succeed as a community without succeeding in homelessness? You can't ignore it. It isn't the number one thing, but you have to deal with it and I know that through this incident command and doing all that stuff, developing those relationships, that's going to help us on housing. That's going to help us on economic development. It's going to help us on jobs because people are going to be talking to each other and it develops relationships.
So much of solving homelessness and getting the people inside their head is appealing to their compassion and that. And probably no better way to do that than through the churches. They're built on compassion and that, where a lot of other organizations aren't and that. So maybe that's an avenue, for you to take your roadshow. I don't know, my head's just spinning about, you got a great story, how the heck do you disseminate?
Well, we're working with 2 churches in Modesto to put 4 of the satellites that we're talking about. We're doing housing. The only problem is the funding for the operations. That's what we're working on too. But yeah, you're right about churches are big.
Well, even the city ministry network, the Thursday meetings that they have, they've got a fairly large gathering of people. Would be a great place for you guys to disseminate.
the other thing I'd just throw out there that probably has been not reported at all. In fact, a lot of people probably don't know about it. I think was helpful was Jason and I were invited with one of the other service providers in the county, United Way and Stanislaus County, Stanislaus Community Foundation had a program. And it was about a year. COVID happened. We had our first meeting and then and someone at the meeting said, are we going to meet with this COVID thing? And everyone in the room said, COVID's not a big deal. And then, of course, that was the end of our in-person meetings. But we met for over a year, monthly, for 2 hours on Zoom calls with Francine at United Way. And it had a lot of these smaller nonprofits that we talked about. It had Jenny Boyer. It had Family Promise, which, is houses families among churches. Very small, We Care, Salvation Army, Turlock Gospel Mission. And it was primarily geared towards infrastructure for, and we got grants to do infrastructure through United Way and the Community Foundation. But the best part of it was that we kind of got to talk for an hour or so once a month with each other, just about, it wasn't like Seesaw where they're angling for funds. It was, hey, wow, it was really hard. I had 2 people quit last week and 3 people had COVID, and I had to run the shelter myself, and it was just a lot of shared experiences. And I think that went a long way just in unifying a lot of the nonprofits, just
Building relationships.
building relationships, getting to know people. So
Do any of these folks, we haven't heard from any of these.
We haven't given them a chance. Does
Yeah.
anyone online, do any of you want to add comment or commentary, thoughts, ideas, suggestions that are on the Zoom call?
I'd just like to add that I appreciate the work that you're doing. Homeless is a complicated problem for the community. And as you stated, relationships are very important for us as a community to start addressing these problems. And you know, this community is really caring. They care about everyone here, and they're looking for ways to find opportunities for those who haven't had opportunity. And some of our biggest problems is that we don't have the opportunity to get together, have conversations, understand what's happening across the different cities, and really find ways to improve. So I appreciate all the work you do, and I look forward to providing support and opportunities for education here at MJC, and working with you with the chamber board to see what we can do to help the homeless situation throughout Stanislaus County.
Thank you, Dejanay. Anyone else? We're down to our last 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Renee.
Yes, hi. Hi, this is Nike Kasich. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the discussion. It was very insightful and informative. And I just wanted to let folks know that HealthNet has been discussing, or it has been in discussions with Ruben and others in the county to see how we can support. Some of the conversations that you've had actually ties in nicely with Count Ames initiative. And so again, I look forward to figuring out a way of partnering and supporting the county's effort. And again, thank you so much for the insightful discussion. It was really stimulating.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, and I appreciate you joining us tonight.
You know, I will just add, the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance is the second Wednesday at 5:30 in the council chambers down in the basement. And the goal is that everything homeless can be discussed there. And you've got, and people from the shelter come and complain about stuff, you know, and it's really the place to go to find out what's happening. So, and it's recorded too and put out, so you guys have a chance to selectively look at that.
I would love to get some more information about the meeting or previous meetings that have been recorded. So again, if you could let me know where I could find that website for that information, I would really appreciate that.
I think it's Stanislaus COC. It's under that, it's Shaw is.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much.
David, Mike, or Renee want to chime in? Oh, Renee sent a comment. I apologize. All right, done. Down to our last minute.
all right, so just it's that time. We are dark in December just because third Friday is too close to Christmas. We already have January and February booked. So Supervisor Buck Condit will be here for January on the 21st. And then we have 2 city council members, including one on the call. So Rosa, City Council Member Rosa, is going to talk on the Modesto Comprehensive General Plan update, which is great because that's usually an annual topic for EDC. So we'll be addressing it at GRC. And then David Wright's talking about Tuolumne Regional Park, and that'll be in February 18th.
Nice.
So if everyone have just a happy holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and whatever else you celebrate with your families. And thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everyone.